Home is indeed where the heart is, and as a student, you may very well spend 4 or 5 years away from mom and dad, away from where you grew up, and suddenly this becomes your home. There's many things to consider about student housing, whether you're the student heading to the new area or whether you're the parent or grandparent trying to provide sources of funding for this. Join us on Consider This program today as we break down some of the things that you might need to consider. Well, good morning and welcome back to Consider This program. I'm your host, Joe Clark.
And I'm Chris Rodgers.
A quiet Chris Rodgers. Yeah, he is here. And you know, Chris, I am so glad we're going to talk about student housing and that home is where the heart is. We're going to come at this from two different perspectives. You were the student, your parents paid for the housing, right? And in my case, I paid for the student who had the housing, right?
Yes.
And both of them, well, hopefully yours didn't go as bad as mine. So we're gonna walk through that. I don't have your mom and dad to interview right now, or I would ask these questions. We could call them.
We'll
phone a friend, right? Get them in here. All right. So let's talk about this. As a graduate of Anderson University, living in student housing, tell me what went through your mind and your decision-making process when you were specifically looking where to live.
Yeah, Joe. So when I was really in the moment, I wanted that college experience, right? Like each freshman going into college says that, hey, I want to live in a dorm. I want to, do all of these things, and it's part of the experience, right? It is at least what people say it's all cracked up to be. But really, what went through my mind, and I don't know if it's from the job that I worked as a banker and being through all that, but part of that was the opportunity cost in my mind. When I did a little bit of research before coming on here, and I just to see what the average room and board costs, right? And so right now, the average student is going to be looking at anywhere from $10,000 to $12,000 per year of room and board just to live in a dorm
with a roommate, usually.
Yes, just to have a college experience. And to me, that just doesn't make sense.
But you did it.
No.
Now the truth comes out.
Yes.
So how did you break this down? You gave me 3 things that you thought about: cost, location, and where the funds came to take care of it.
Yes.
So let's talk about cost. It's $1,000 a month, and they've got a roommate. When I went to IU, I used to joke. Yes, I was a professor at Purdue, but I went to IU. I used to joke and go, when I was in this dorm room that was a third of the size of the studio, right? And they were charging me $800 a month, right, for room and board. I ate, but not that much, right? And my roommate was a baseball player. He surely didn't eat that much. And I'm thinking, if you guys are losing money on $1,600 out of this room, somebody ought to be fired, right?
Yes.
Just done. Anyhow, just saying. Those were painful days, right? So cost. So what did you end up doing if you didn't use the student housing?
Yes. So what made the most sense for me is to actually look at commuting. So I grew up in Cicero, Indiana, right near Morris Reservoir. And so for me, I decided I was going to go to Anderson University. And so to me, it's about a 30-minute drive or so. And so what made the most sense to me is to look at commuting. My parents were willing to let me stay at their house, obviously. And so with that being the case, I got to save almost $40,000 just by living at home. I still got the same college experience. I still got to make a lot of friends. I still got to have that great experience, but I didn't have to take out, the loans and the debt to be able to do it.
Good for you. I'm all about that. Seth Grimmie is our lead associate advisor and did the same thing. He was on the golf team at IU Kokomo. Got his degree in 3 years, not 4, while playing golf, had a high GPA, has no debt, lived at home. I mean, he had this methodically, boom, 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 right? Oh, yeah. So I try to hire smart people, and boy, Chris and Seth are certainly 2 of them. So if, let's say you didn't live in Cicero and you were more than a half an hour away, what would you say the options are for student housing today?
Yeah, so obviously you have the traditional way of, hey, you can live in a dorm on campus. That's probably the most expensive option.
Parents feel the safest, right? Typically, I mean, I won't even go there, but parents typically feel the safest. I had a really bad experience. For those of you who don't know, so if there's a little bit of color to this conversation, my daughter was going to Indiana State. Or not Indiana State, I apologize, IUPUI, got down there. The room had no air conditioner, no elevator. It was on like the 4th or 5th floor. They decided, they being, in this case, I know that it was my wife and my daughter, decided to get an apartment off campus. At the end, when she was leaving, because that didn't work out, they were actually kidnapped at gunpoint. And it was a very, very horrible story. So I have kind of heated stuff about this. But I will tell you, as parents, living in a dorm seems to provide a sense of they're more protected. Whether that's real or not, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day too, it does come down to obviously location too. I mean, that's one thing that if you are a parent or grandparent, is taking a look at campus safety. What does that look like? What town are they going to be in? How close could an apartment possibly be to that area? Is it well lit? Things like that. Those are all things that at least should go through your mind. And when you're taking your kids on their tour through the campus, ask those questions. I think it's important to figure out what type of security they have. At least when my experience at AU, that was one of the first things that they covered is hey, they have these certain poles and they have these lights and the security that's there at all times. And so, those are important things.
Yeah. So let's turn this to now you're the daddy or the grandpa or grandma or the mama, and you're helping somebody make these financial decisions, right? Yep. In terms of where they go. And, again, 32 years of doing this, right? So I get to tell you the best of the best and the worst of the worst. I believe I've probably seen that on all sides. And so I will give you a case of a young man. The grandpa was a business owner and loved his grandson dearly and helped paid for college, right? Mm-hmm. But they made a mistake in terms of understanding the tax code. And what happened, the grandpa had passed away, leaving behind the grandma. And the grandma wanted the grandson to actually write out the check for the tuition, to write out the check for the cost of room and board, to write out the check so that we're getting a material understanding of what cost really looked like. Sure. So she would deposit money into his account, right? And then he would write the checks. And then it just so happened he wound up in my class where I informed him. And one day, and when he comes up at the end, he's got these big eyes and goes, "You mean we can't do da-da-da-da-da?" And I go, "No, you can't do da-da-da-da-da." And what do we do now? And it's like, I will tell you academically, it was wrong. I will tell you from a tax standpoint, rarely is this ever caught. That doesn't mean that you should do it. It doesn't mean that computers aren't getting smarter. But what should have happened, and I understand the point of trying to teach the student, responsibility and how to do this, any gifts that you make to a person. So if I can give Chris, who's not related to me, $15,000. I can give that gift to my kids. I can give that gift to the neighbor down the street. You can give it as many people as you want, but with no strings attached. Right. It is limited by $15,000. Now, since Barb and I are married, I could actually give you 30. Yep. Right? And since you're married, I could actually give you 60.
Caitlin will be thrilled.
Caitlin is out of luck, right? And I wouldn't hold I would not wait for this, Rodgers. You should eat again prior to, waiting for the gift. But regardless, that is what can technically happen. Now, if I make a payment directly to a medical institution, to a doctor, a hospital, or for tuition, to an accredited university or even the skilled trades places. If I make the check directly to the institution, not to the individual, it doesn't count in the $15,000, right? And that is something that they should have considered doing. Mm-hmm. I don't know at AU. I know a lot of the people who own the property around AU, so this is not an easy thing for people to do. Some of the friends that I went to high school with in Central, outside of West Lafayette, own 30 to 50 apartments now. And their mother wanted to teach them responsibility because they were always going to have money, thanks to grandma and grandpa and things that people had done in the past correctly. And so when they turned 7, they actually got a property. And it was the worst property they could find on campus. And the kids had to learn how to do drywall, electricity, roofing, the whole thing over the course of the summer, right? And now some of them are these big apartment buildings. It's kind of hilarious. But, but it was very, very wise in terms of the way they did it. But a lot of people buy property so that they're actually collecting the rent from their own money, and then they move other people in while they're up there. Oh, yeah. Did you see that happen at AU?
Yeah, absolutely. Even because I worked for a bank while I was in college, so I actually got to see some of the renters and see how that works. But when you're walking through campus, you're walking into the cafeteria. They all have hey, you can get this apartment, this house, take a tab, and call this number and do those things. And so we certainly saw that a lot, and especially right around campus. I know exactly what you're talking about with all the different houses and apartments that people try to rent out and to try to do. And for them, it works out.
For some, it
For
works
some,
out.
yes.
Not for all of them. And I will tell you, I don't normally talk about investing on this show. We try to keep it at financial planning. If you want my investment thoughts or Adam Harder, our CFA and Chief Investment Officer's thoughts, you can get that on the Market Carver. It's free. You can go to our website at yourlifeafterwork.com, get signed up for that. But I am going to give you my personal opinion in this. As somebody who taught for 7 years at Purdue University, 14 semesters, as somebody who's paid to put a kid through college, and watched all of the things that transpire and some of the games that are played, as I study return on investment and everything else that's there. Among this, I will tell you that I believe, other than healthcare, the number one thing that's going to get disintermediated over COVID is actually going to be higher education. When I taught at Purdue, I was so frustrated over who replaced me when I left. I felt a moral and ethical obligation to the students. I almost put my entire class on video and started selling it to other universities, and doing that. Well, number one, nobody would have thought that you could have done that in 2015. We still have churches that don't use the projector to be able to do sermons. Ours does at North Point, or at Northview rather, here in out of Indianapolis and in the Anderson campus. But there's different things. Now that we have Zoomed for a year, and we know that e-learning works, it is not going to surprise me if more and more people stay at home and have a professor from MIT and a professor from Stanford and a professor from Ball State and a professor from Butler and Purdue and IU, depending on what it is they're learning, as opposed to that college experience that you talked about. It will revert to a college education. Yeah. And so I've been cautioning people on overfunding 529s. That doesn't mean don't use them. Just respect the fact that things change, and when things change, you're not always given a parachute to get out of them, right? Pay attention to what's going on and where you are and what's changing in this dynamic. In crisis, change will occur. You haven't seen all of the changes yet from COVID, but they're coming and they will continue. Hey, go to yourlifeafterwork.com, get signed up for a Next Steps meeting. Come in and see Chris, the planning team. Sit down. They'll give you 90 minutes of their best thought on things you need to consider today, things you're going to want to consider in the future, and if we choose to partner together, what FEG will do for you, and we'll put it into writing. yourlifeafterwork.com.